With the game being a little more than a month old at this point, I think it's time to discuss Metaphor Refantazio in more detail. I posted a video before the game launched, explaining some concerns I had about it that I hoped would not come to be once I got my hands on the game and watched the credits rolled. These concerns being a story that fell flat and did not have a proper payoff, to the setup of themes and story beats that the game had either built up within itself or through promotional material. The latter concern was brought about after playing Persona 5 in 2017. Now, I have not played Persona 5 Royal, and I have heard the final act of the game was changed, so maybe it was redeemed in some way there. Regardless, in my experience, I was let down with Persona 5's story and message, despite it being a fun, well thought out game overall. The promotional material definitely hyped the game up to have this substantial message about society, which all I got out of it was that adults suck and friends stick together. After finishing Metaphor, I was sort of pondering for a bit, wondering if my concerns were founded or not. Did the gameplay, characters, story, and themes correlate into a meaningful, applicable message to our world? Well, that's what I'm mainly going to discuss here, without getting into too many late game specific story details. In case you're not in the loop, the game begins with the protagonist and his companion Gallica on the way to the capital city, Grand Trad, to find their ally who will help them break the curse plaguing the prince. This takes place after the king was assassinated by Count Luis. Now, it's shown to us in the opening cutscene, but how the main characters know that it was Luis who killed the king remains a mystery to me. Anyways, you sign up for the army, meet your first friend, fight a monster called a human, meet the guy you are searching for, attend a funeral, and then the king shows up from beyond the grave as a giant floating rock and says, "We're doing a democracy for the crown, you guys." All within the first few hours of the game. Now that is merely the setup. Within the runtime ranging from 60 to 100 hours of your playthrough will lead you on a journey to meet colorful characters, varied cultures, interesting landmarks, and so many plot twists you're bound to be stunned by at least one of them. I won't go into any more specific detail about the story, although later on I will talk sort of vaguely about how certain details maintain the themes of the story, as to not spoil it for anyone who might be still playing the game for the first time. Hopefully when you get to those points I was referring to, you can think, oh, that's why he said that. For now, I'd like to talk about what I consider to be half the gameplay flow, which is the combat. Yes, Metaphor Refantazio is a turn-based RPG. Being a game developed by Atlas, it does take a lot of gameplay elements from its previous titles and mix them together in a very coherent way. The turn-based combat in Metaphor mostly takes after the press turn system introduced in Atlas's Shin Megami Tensei series. Hitting an enemy with a critical hit or weakness will use only half a character's turn icon rather than the whole thing, and missing and attacking and hitting the enemy with an attack they're immune to or repel will remove an extra turn icon. Same goes for the enemy. It's really snappy and can make random encounters potentially go by really fast, seeing as you can just continuously make more turns for yourself and defeat the enemy before they have a chance to retaliate. But something that makes the combat even faster this time around is the overworld combat. As you run around dungeons, you can actually hit enemies with whatever weapon you have equipped. You will either stun the enemy, giving you an advantage when you shift to turn-based combat, or if you're strong enough, you will just outright defeat the enemy there and then while still earning the rewards you would have gotten from defeating them in turn-based combat. This makes grinding so much more efficient and is one of my favorite features of the game. When it comes to those unavoidable turn-based fights though, there are enough customization possibilities to make building your party a rewarding experience. If you're familiar with Atlas's spin-off title Persona, you should be familiar with the main cast being able to summon personas to aid them in battle with tremendous power. In Metaphor, there was a similar system called Archetypes, also a likely reference to Carl Jung's idea of pattern thought. More on that later though. Similar to personas, archetypes can be equipped to give party members a set of skills, and strengths and weaknesses to certain attack types. Unlike Persona, however, it's not just a protagonist that can change archetypes, but the entire party as well. This leads to seemingly endless party composition possibilities. Although I mainly stuck with the archetypes the other party members initially awoke into, I only switched things up to develop that lineage further or to do something specific with the protagonist. Despite that, I can still see how the system rewards experimentation, especially with the skills tied to party composition called synthesis. Synthesis are these powerful abilities only possible by having specific archetypes active in the same party. These not only reward careful attention to what archetypes you bring into battle, but these are also a subtle thematic element supported through gameplay. That is, the greatest power is only possible through cooperation. And in Metaphor, your friends can help you in more ways than just in battle. The social link system makes a return in Metaphor, except now it's called the follower system, and there are only 8 major events per character rather than 10. These are sort of short episodes connected to one character who has vouched to support you. Going into these, I was wondering if they would support the themes of segregation and prejudice that was so apparent in the game. Some of them do actually offer some nuanced stances on issues, which surprised me. I will be honest though, I was kind of able to get the gist of what a lot of these stories were about and ended up skipping some of the conclusive parts of some of the followers' stories. Waking up your connections to followers is still very much tied to combat, so these are definitely important to clear. I wouldn't say I was especially moved by the majority of the stories. Hercules is a notable exception that comes to mind, although there are a few others that I'm probably just not thinking about at the moment. Small stories aside, the main story though does offer a lot. So briefly mentioned earlier, prejudice, racism, corruption, social hierarchy are major themes in the game's story. Your character is an elder, which in this world is a tribe associated with bad omens, or at least that's what the Sanctus Church wants you to believe. Oh yeah, there's also no separation of church and state in this world either. The main religion is also the main governing force of the land, after the king died anyways. And now all the shady work they've been doing behind the scenes is now become more intensified. Progressing through the main story and some follower episodes unravels some truths about the church in which you realize that those in power do not have the everyday people's needs in mind. Sound familiar? There's even a shop in the beginning of the game that won't sell to you just because of your race, or tribe. I was really taken aback, like damn, I'm experiencing prejudice in my video game? I do appreciate that Alice has chosen to depict these injustices in the game about rising to power, and how these injustices are not only morally abhorrent, but an ineffective way of creating a well-functioning society. Prejudice is a very much real-world issue, which in line with the namesake of the game, really drives home the point that the player should be making connections to reality constantly. A particularly substantial connection made to our world is the inclusion of Jungian psychology. Atlus loves integrating Jungian psychology into the games. Most obvious is the use of personas and shadows in the Persona series. I didn't make the connection to how Carl Jung was referenced in Metaphor initially, but after watching Max Durat's video about Metaphor, I saw the reference. Carl Jung, for the uninitiated, is sort of the father of analytical psychology. Although controversial, he laid a lot of the groundwork to how we study the mind. Archetypes and Metaphor are similar to how Jungian archetypes are described. They are innate potentials connected to the collective unconscious that need to be actualized in the context of the environment. Carl Jung suggests that the unconscious mind within everyone shares the same mental concepts as anyone else. Jung's categories of archetypes are actually also found in characters of fiction, characters with qualities associated with motherhood and youth, among others. Jung pointed to similarities within myths, religions, and history as proof that there is a collective unconsciousness of which the archetypes are pulled forth. Metaphor takes the concept of archetypes being dormant within everyone, with only the need to be actualized from the outside world to come forward. Things like Stroll encountering the general responsible for raising his home, for example, brought out within him the archetype of the warrior to fight against him. Now, this isn't a major spoiler, as you could do this near the beginning of the game, but Moore, a character who studies the tales of old kings, explains that the power of archetypes was once held by the legendary kings of their history. If you're in academia and interact with one of the books in the room, Moore will explain that the picture depicts the hero king, who is you. At least whatever you put as the player name in the beginning. But this, as well as the game's ending, really drives home the game's message. Early in the game, I had the expectation that there would be a message at the end of the game which gave a strong stance for or against a certain way of running the world. After the credits rolled, I was reminded of the question given to me at the very beginning of the game, which was whether or not I felt that fantasy holds any power. And then I realized that racism bad or politicians bad wasn't the sole point of the game's message, but rather, do we, the player, believe fantasy holds the power to change the world? It took me a few moments to come to that realization, as my expectations were sort of flipped on its head. After experiencing the game, that question holds more weight to it. I have my own answer to that question, so I'll let you decide for yourself after you play the game whether or not you believe fantasy holds any power. With archetypes sort of being implied to be dormant within everybody, and everybody having the power to use magic in this world of metaphor, and the ties to the real world, as in naming the player after yourself and then being referenced to as the old kings within the world of metaphor, is sort of making those fiction to reality connections that Atlas seems to really want you to ponder about. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide whether or not fantasy has any power. Like I said, I have my own answer, and I came to that after playing the game. So I really encourage you to play this game. Overall, I think it is an outstanding JRPG. I think gameplay-wise, really good and a lot of points, but I'd probably just do a second playthrough and then probably never touch the game again, to be honest. But I mean, hell, it's like 100 hours of gameplay. That's pretty dang good. And it has a long, epic, entertaining story with very thought-provoking moments. So yeah, these last couple minutes are the unscripted part of the video, if you can't tell by the change of my tone. But I very much appreciate you sitting down, watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, liking, commenting would be very much appreciated. What did you think about Metaphor? Would you like me to make more videos covering Metaphor? Are there any other games you would like me to cover? I'm definitely gonna be working on making more videos about various games in the coming future. So if you would want, if you want to see that, subscribing would help me out a ton and also help keep you updated on whenever I upload a new video. All right, okay. Thank you very much for watching. I love Metaphor Refantazio. It's a great game, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.